Dave, welcome to the show. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us about what you do?
My name is Dave Carroll. I'm a singer-songwriter and a speaker for the last 10 years in the areas of customer service, branding, and storytelling. I live in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and I'm probably best known for a video that I did in response to a bad customer service experience with United Airlines called United Breaks Guitars back in 2009.
Back in 2009, it's almost 10 years. When did this, it came out March, April?
July. July.
July.
I guess I posted it, yeah.
Okay, so a year and a year, 10 years and a year.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Wow, and that was one of the three events I remember from 2009 that kind of catapulted this new world of crisis management and real-time obstacles and all that. It was United Breaks Guitars, which is you. It was the Domino's Pizza fiasco. Do you remember?
Yep.
When employees did disgusting things to the food and posted it on YouTube. And it was the same year that the plane landed in the Hudson.
Yes.
Just outside of New York. And people on Twitter were faster at reporting on it than the media. Those three things all happened in 2009 and really catapulted just this new way of communication and crisis management, issue management.
Absolutely. And I remember at the time, I'm still behind the curve in terms of social media innovation and that sort of thing. In terms of using the tools and getting into them on a daily basis, I use them to I guess advance my storytelling and that sort of thing. But I didn't know what Twitter was when I started using it. I got at Dave Carroll. That tells you how early I got in, because there's a million Dave Carrolls in the world. And I was tweeting, and people were saying, you got to tweet this, and you only have 140 characters. And I thought, this will never catch on. I resented being constrained to 140 characters, but I said, whatever, I'll do it. But there's no future in this.
That's so funny. And when was that? Was that before United Breaks Guitars?
That was right after.
It was right after.
I was already using Facebook, and that was, and of course email, that sort of thing. But Twitter was right after the video went viral.
Okay.
The week that I started tweeting.
Okay. And tell the audience a little bit about what that took. I want to talk about so much with you, but just to give them context, because I think that so often we see an overnight success, right? And in any type of industry or field, and we don't understand the work behind it. And of course, you're a singer, songwriter, speaker, you've worked, entrepreneur, you've worked your entire career. But there was, even with United Breaks Guitars, it wasn't an overnight success in the sense of it just happened and it stayed. You worked that. And I love that story and I believe that people should understand that context behind the story.
Yeah, it was completely organic in the sense that I didn't have an overall plan. I didn't say, I'm going to make it go viral, then I'm going to go on the interview circuit, and I'm going to be, hitting up Harvard to do a case study on it. All those things were inbound, but I think it had a lot to do with the fact that I was willing to jump through every door that opened, and without waiting to develop expertise and say, okay, I am now, I've had all my media training, I'm ready for interviews. The truth is I was going in and I was doing interviews in Halifax in different studios, and going into the back room where they'd have a mural of the town that you're in this case, Halifax, and there'd be one camera, and the camera would be pointed right at you, but you wouldn't see the person interviewing you via satellite, and there was just a cameraman there paid to run the camera. So no one was giving me any guidance, and I was doing those first interviews, sort of answering questions, saying, yeah, my guitar got broken, like I was on a phone call. And you watch him later and you think, this guy's completely untrustworthy. I can't trust this guy, because you're supposed to look at the camera all the time, right? and I wasn't doing that. So I would watch those things and say, yeah, I got to do that. And someone would give you a piece of advice and say, just look at the camera the whole time. And just because they're saying it very calmly doesn't mean it's not crucially important.
Doesn't mean you should count every word.
Yeah.
And I have this vision of you, and it's stuck with me. Probably, it's either from our first interview together, which was, I don't even know how many years ago, or reading your book. But it's of you sitting in the car with your brother driving you to an interview. This is like the day after, 2 days after United Breaks Guitars went viral, which is like the day after you published it, with, your laptop answering. So you're on your way to an interview, you're on your laptop answering interviews, and you've got like two phones in your ears, answering interviews like that. And that's the vision that I have.
And it was like that. It was very much like that. In that particular case, we were going from one studio to another, and it was my friend Julian Marentet, who was kind of my right-hand man. And we went and bought a book at Staples, a little black book like this one, and it had all of the interview requests would go through Julian. And so I would be driving, and a standard no less, and doing calls, and one time Bob Taylor called from Taylor Guitars, and so I say that's like God calling you on the telephone if you like Taylor Guitars, and it was crazy. So
That's awesome.
it was exhilarating, yeah.
But you were there to be open to the opportunity.
Yeah, so I didn't know what the opportunity was, but I jumped into it with both feet, and I was open to that it could be anything. And when this first happened, as a musician for 20 years, we assembled sort of a brain trust. My brother was there, my father-in-law, who's been in business a long time, and a bunch of music professionals. We went to the Music Nova Scotia office, sat in the boardroom there, and just said, what is this? And almost to a person, everyone thought it was going to be constrained to, you're going to get 15 minutes of fame. I would make some t-shirts and you'll sell them at your shows, and then that will be it. And that's what people thought it was, because musicians would ride a wave of popularity. But my father-in-law and my brother and I saw something else. And it wasn't long after that I got my first call to be a public speaker for Right Now Technologies in Colorado Springs. And it was a random call, and they just said, we'd like you to be our opening speaker in Colorado Springs. 700 of the biggest brands of the world are going to be there, and we'd like you to be our opening keynote for the next 4 days. And you do this all the time, right? And I said, of course I do.
Of course.
And I hadn't done a lick of public speaking, even on stage. My brother did most of the talking, but I said yes. And they said, great, your presentation's in 10 days, which I know you would probably panic, knowing if someone said you have to develop a whole new talk and have it ready in 10 days. I didn't know at the time.
Cancel my schedule.
You're right. So I just said, I'd like to customize that for you if you don't mind. And then I had to get off the phone and ask my father-in-law what a PowerPoint presentation was, because musicians didn't. So it was baptism by fire. That's
awesome. So what's Twitter and what's PowerPoint?
Yeah, exactly.
This is what I've learned from you today.
Yeah. Twitter is apparently a tool that helps you get out small thoughts in short bursts, but I'm still not exactly sure.
Which can have quite huge impact on things like the market if tweeted by the right person or the wrong person. Yeah, exactly. So 10 years, just about. How has the world changed since United Breaks Guitars just started or, happened?
Yeah. Customer service means a whole lot more to companies. And I think at the time when the video went viral, there was a culture in big companies, and in my case it was United, but there was a whole bunch of them that I think felt you would have customer service support, and as long as you fell within the big catch-all of the frequently asked questions and frequently offered complaints, then you could probably answer those. But if you fell outside of those, it didn't really matter, as long as most of the people were happy most of the time. And they didn't really care about the statistically insignificant ones. And I think the video, United Breaks Guitars, I think, sent shockwaves around big businesses around the world. Or at least that's what I'm told. Because it showed that one customer could detract from an otherwise invincible brand and make them a whole lot more vulnerable. And so today, I've had people, there's a professor at Columbia University who says that this video was sort of, it was a pioneer in the area of social media monitoring. And it showed the value, and it's what companies, when they're selling these to other companies, these tools, they often reference that video because it's sort of a landmark case.
Absolutely. It absolutely is. And it will always be. It was, like I said earlier, it was the catalyst. I know people are wondering, how did United react with the video? I know how they reacted, which, sparked the video.
No, they were caught pretty flat-footed, I think. And that was one of the criticisms, that they didn't really do anything, or everything they did was almost the wrong thing, because they weren't sure what to do. Should they offer this guy some cash and shut up money, and that might fuel the fire more, or should they just not get involved and let it blow itself out, which was also the wrong thing to do. So they didn't say, I'm sorry. They didn't say, we really messed up here. Instead, what they did is they tried to deflect attention, which was certainly common at the time, and even still, for some of these situations where people don't contact you to help them out. But they would use things like 96.9% of the bags arrive on time or without incident, trying to draw attention to what they do well instead of admitting what they didn't do well and saying we're going to change that. And that fueled the fire a lot, where millions of people were having conversations about bad customer service in the world, and often referencing this. And number one, United wasn't online engaging in the conversation and trying to change or offer something to the narrative. They just sort of offered press releases that said something different. And I think going forward, other companies are starting to learn from that you have to own the mistake and show that you're willing to change. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I say it often that we live in this society that loves drama with, you know, reality television and all of these different things. But what we love more as human beings than drama is a happy ending. And we're rooting for the brands that we love, the people that we respect and admire. So as much as people were rooting for you, they would have also been rooting for you to get what you deserved by the company doing the right thing, therefore also rooting for the company.
Right. Yeah, I think I've seen it at so many levels over the years, and even within my own story, there's people are always looking for confrontation. So I got messages from people from Mexico who said, "I like the video, except you're making fun of Mexicans, and they're trying to get something going because the guys were wearing sombreros."
Yeah.
I wasn't making fun of Mexicans. I just wanted guys in mariachi outfits, and I couldn't afford mariachi outfits, so I put sombreros on them. And that seems to calm them down. But people are always looking for confrontation, and they do want a happy ending. And if you can give them that, if there's integrity in your story, people want to see themselves, or when they can see themselves in your story, they feel energized, and it's like you're working for them. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what sends something going viral anyways, is that emotional, compelling, and relatability factors.
Right.
But you say something interesting there that I think that I want to zone in on. You said that people from Mexico were insulted and they wrote you. You said vaguely that you kind of gave the story and that they were happy with that. Finish that, because if you can, because so many times organizations are confronted with criticism and just all the same type of, you know, misconception or misunderstanding when something is put out, whether it's a marketing campaign or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that can escalate, or that can turn into just a loss of trust by those key stakeholders, right? So what did that look like for you?
Well, it was pretty cool in a sense that I saw what you can do. They call it the customer service paradox, when you take somebody who's really against your brand and you convert them into a strong ambassador. And I kind of saw that within just like a day-to-day thing that no one ever really heard about. But I got an awful email from someone. They were tearing it to pieces because the video was so racist towards Mexicans. And I took the time to explain directly to them, but in the public way too, because if they're saying that, they're not the only ones who are thinking it. And It bothered me because I never even considered it. It just didn't even cross my mind, but clearly someone saw that. So I thought I better address this and do it publicly and do it right away. And I told them what it meant to me and why I did it. And instantly they responded, and all the animosity and the confrontation was gone. And they said, and they were completely different people. It was like, oh, okay, well, thank you. And now I can enjoy the video and share it with my friends. And that was completely solved, right?
Amazing.
And that can happen in companies on a daily basis. Right?
Yep.
You can solve huge problems that way.
Yeah, and that's issue management. A big thing is issues, because they're not crisis level, they either present opportunity for building trust and credibility, or they chip away at the trust and credibility over time if you don't manage them effectively. So that's a beautiful example of issue management. What did you say in that communication? Not verbatim, but just kind of the sentiment behind it.
And things like that, I actually get energized when I get those things, because I see it as a real opportunity, because I know in this particular case, I had no issue with Mexicans, and I have no issues like that at all. So I could be completely honest, and they would never find anything that would be incongruent with my story. So I think this is an opportunity to set things straight and change this person. And so I first of all apologized that they saw that in the video, and I said, this is what I was thinking, this is how I approached it, and this is the response it's been getting. And then wait for them to answer. If they don't want to answer, then I guess that's fine. But I guess they say, the purpose of listening is to understand, not to wait for your opportunity to say something else. And so I wanted to get their feedback on what I just said to them. And yeah, it's a
And
conversation.
and that was an email, right?
Yeah, an email. Yeah.
Which then you then took
No,
that same
no,
kind of, it
no,
was public?
it was public. Yeah, I think it was on the YouTube comments.
Okay.
Yeah, so because it was a public forum that they presented that to, so I spoke to them on the platform that they were using, which
Yeah,
is important too.
it is. And then you mentioned that you wanted other people to see it or to know it, because you're right. If one person thinks it, they're not alone. Not with the amount of people in the world. And so did you just leave that and that was your public way of saying it, or did you address it more
Well,
proactively as well?
so I guess this is an example of how when you stand up and you take ownership of a problem, sometimes you get an opportunity and a bigger platform to do that. So when I responded to this person publicly, uh, I went and did an interview at CNN Hollywood, and it was CNN Espanol. So it was going to something like 30 million Spanish-speaking people in the world. And they asked that question because they saw my response. They gave me an opportunity to answer it to
Oh, wonderful.
potentially 30 million people. And if I hadn't have responded and just hid my head, maybe they wouldn't even ask for the interview. And if they would have, maybe they would have just left it open for 30 million more people to wonder if I was poking fun at them.
Absolutely. Wonderful. I love that. That's something that I didn't know from
Yeah.
your story.
I
Thank you.
keep those little nuggets for things like this.
There are, but relatable and applicable to organizations on every single level, whether you're an entrepreneur or the Uniteds of the world.
I've noticed since I started speaking, there's a lot of people that most of the people, like, I guess, are open to what I'm going to say and they get into the message, but there's always, you can tell when you're speaking, right? That you can tell who's behind you 100% and who's holding back a bit. And you see those people in the audience and they're looking at me sometimes like, why is this guy at a tech conference? Or he's a musician, he's a singer-songwriter. I feel like the guy that just stayed in a Holiday Inn Express last night, right? Doesn't know anything about their business. But the insights that I speak about are universal truths that speak from the heart to the heart, and business is really just an opportunity to be of service to other people. And it's when I speak to those things and I have a chance to share those stories, usually the lessons will hit the people on the mark and let them take it into their area of expertise.
Yep, very true. And it lends to building that invincible brand. It really does, which is why you and I have such great synergy.
Yeah.
Our messages align. One of the things that you said it earlier, but you're statistically insignificant. No one person is or should be seen or having a culture of being seen as statistically insignificant.
Yeah.
I quote you all the time on that one. I love that. That one really resonated and stayed with me. Talk a little bit about that in the context of, for listeners and viewers, what that means and why that's important. And I mean, clearly it's important because you don't want the next United Breaks Guitars to be against your brand, but it doesn't have to escalate that far or that high in order for that truth to be truth.
Yeah. So fairly early on, I got invited to Capitol Hill to speak at a passengers' rights hearing, and it was to address the long waits that people have had on the tarmacs. It's not so much an issue now, but there were issues of JetBlue was the big one that had passengers on a tarmac for like 10 or 15 hours. And there were people that had medications that they didn't have access to, and they had no diapers and water on the plane and tarmac. And so the government said, we're going to take control of this and start restricting what you can do, what you can't do. And everyone that was there was supposed to be on the side of this bill that was under discussion. And they had a former CEO of a major American airline there, and he was talking about, it all sounded great. And then he started going on a tangent and saying, these things, though, airports and airlines have it tough. And so planes are essentially leaving on time almost every time. And the times they don't, like JetBlue, are statistically insignificant. And it occurred to me that this guy was like a great speaker, and he was a captain of industry, but he didn't understand customer service, especially in the age of social media, because he was saying those people on the JetBlue plane were statistically insignificant, and they are so not, especially now in the age of social media. And they had a voice, and it got very loud and very uncomfortable for all of the airlines because of the way that the company handled that one incident. And so statistical insignificance, I think, is something, it's the difference between shooting for 100% or 99. And that 1% difference is a world of difference for when you have a competitor, for sure. because we all know what that feels like. And I would rather shoot to do business with someone who's looking for 100% and one who's doing 99, because no one's ever going to hit those targets. But how you handle a crisis is how I think you measure yourself against your competition and show your true colors.
Yep, absolutely. It is. And it's about having those and building those relationships, those true relationships with those who matter most to your business. Right. So and that speaks to one topic that you speak on now is compassion.
Mm. Yeah, I think when I first started speaking, I definitely had the idea that the reason the video was successful was because we were all connected. And I just sort of left it at that. And over the years, I've been delving more into the idea that what does it mean if we're connected? What does that mean? And I've decided that I think it means that we have a fundamental obligation to care more for each other if we have a fundamental connection. And as I look into it, I'm finding more and more evidence of it. You're seeing it in all the self-help books that just talk about how you and I as people should be kinder to other people. But I'm seeing it in business too, where people are starting to see that compassion is really just, there are pain points in your organization, and just identifying them isn't going to solve it. You have to actually be willing to alleviate those pain points. And that's what compassion can be for your business. It doesn't have to be that you stop the presses and turn everything off and start hugging everybody. It can mean something just as simple as getting behind your employees and seeing all of the stakeholders simultaneously, and not just the shareholders, and say, I want to make an improvement because I know if my employees are happy, my churn goes down. I have skilled employees that are inspired to help people. And when there's a problem, the problems get solved. My suppliers are healthy and they're getting paid on time so they can keep giving us the tools we need to do good business. And customers are happy and the shareholders are happy too. Everybody can be happy at the same time. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
Yep. It can't be one or the other. It's cycle. It's a
Yeah.
circle. One of my crisis ready rules that I love is people above process and bottom line always. And that speaks to that.
Yeah.
Business is about people. That's what good business is built on. It's relationships. Crisis management is about people. Issue management is about people.
I think your book is not only timely, but it's kind of like the Bible of
Thank you.
Yeah, I think every company should be reading this, and whether they engage you personally or not, they should be reading this book and have it on the desk of everybody who makes an important decision.
Thank you.
Mm.
And you, any new books coming out or in
I'm
the
working on
works?
this idea of compassion and assembling stories, success stories of companies that are doing it right. And there are so many different ways that you can enact compassion in your business. That's what I really find exciting about it, is because there could be companies that on the surface you don't think they're compassionate because they're not touchy-feely, but they are looking for good employees and treating them really well. And then you watch how that spins out. Or they have a goal and they say, here's a problem in the world. I'm gonna solve a problem with that. Like SpaceX is apparently Elon Musk isn't the touchy-feeliest guy in the world, and you wouldn't think maybe he's so compassionate, but he did say, I have a goal, I want to get to Mars. So I'm going to help fund that, I'm going to create a space program that's going to be able to take satellites at a reduced cost so that people that are building space age technologies can actually do things that will improve the world and do it affordably. It's this sort of chain and cycle, like you said, of doing things for all stakeholders that improve all of our opportunities to advance.
So I love that. So taking the people above process and bottom line always, and looking at that through the lens of compassion and how that builds brand invincibility. What are some, and you've mentioned a couple, but if we look at, I don't know, 3 or 5 kind of lenses through which listeners and viewers can say, okay, how can that directly apply? Like, how can we choose that lens to do that better, or to find areas of weakness where we can strengthen, or gaps that we can bridge? You've mentioned a couple, but what are some other ways that organizations can start to kind of benchmark, I suppose, their compassion and strive to augment it?
The beauty, I think, about compassion in your business is that it doesn't have to be quantified. That you can say, I want to be more compassionate as an organization, and it can come in small dips and drabs. Like, it can be encouraging the person at the front of the person who answers the phone. It's how they answer the phone. Are they a little more friendly? Or it could be something larger. Part of the profits of this project are going to go to help this thing. And so but I think it needs to be a cornerstone value of your organization. You really have to want it. And so I have a triangle, a process called 3D compassionate design. And that along the bottom is desire. You have to really want it. And then on the left side, there's direction. You have to all be pulling in the same direction. Align yourself with suppliers and people in the business that believe in what you're doing so that you're all moving towards the top of the triangle, which takes you to the beginning of development. And then when you have everyone pulling the same direction, then you can actually start thinking about how are you going to unravel this and make sure that it's part of the fabric of all the decisions that you make. I spoke at a public utility event in Philadelphia, and they have this approach with safety, that safety in the company is really important. So every meeting they have starts with a safety message from somebody. And they spread it around. They'll say, you're going to give the safety message, so that person is empowered to do something like that. And I think something with compassion would be a good way to start every meeting as well, and say, this is where I saw a pain point, or this is what we could do as a company. This is what I did in my personal life, and it changed my mood when I came to work, and it unraveled this way. Just to keep people thinking and focused on that, because what you focus on is what you live.
What you do and what you empower. It's a cultural thing.
Yeah.
And crisis readiness is cultural. In order to be crisis ready, it needs to be cultural. So it goes hand in hand with that. But it really is. What's the safety messages? Like, what does that look like? Is it kind of like a warning, or is it a story? Is it? I like detail.
Yeah, so that's what I liked about it the most, is that everybody's different and everybody approaches things differently. Introverts and extroverts are not the same. So I'm an introvert by nature. I hate when I'm in a room and everybody says, get up everybody, and start massaging the person beside you.
Oh, yeah.
And they'll get that on video for their sizzle reels. And they'll say, look at how this person whips crowds into a frenzy. And I can't wait till it stops. Right. And that, I think, with safety messages and this sort of thing, somebody else might find a story. Somebody else might be vulnerable enough to share a story about themselves. It could be, I had a fire extinguisher in my kitchen, and I left the frying pan on, and a fire, and luckily I had my fire extinguisher. That's a personal story, but someone else might talk about the potential dangers of, not having a fire hose in the building, and then pull up a video of a building on fire in Las Vegas or something, and so it's really just about getting people to start thinking about it in a way that they're comfortable doing it.
I like that. I like it because it's just, okay. So when I started in this field, or in this profession, blogging helped me. Blogging, that was my marketing tactic or strategy when I started out, because I had no marketing budget and I had a lot to say, a lot to get out there. So I blogged 5 days a week for a few years. And just the act of blogging changed I credit blogging to a big part of even just my personal professional growth, because it changes the lens. You're always looking for a new angle, or you can see one thing that nobody else will relate to crisis or issue management, but I can tie back to it. And there's some really good messages there, really good, tactics or whatever it may be. So the lens of just always being open to look for something. And I like the idea of, this was a utilities company, so safety is of utmost importance.
Yeah.
And having that culture where you're saying, just think, it can be anything, right? The realm, the scope is unlimited, as long as it ties back to safety in some way.
Yeah.
I think that that's extremely powerful in terms of really, truly living, breathing, implementing the culture that you're seeking to implement.
Yeah, and I would say that safety thing is sort of compassionate design and action, and for a company, nobody wants anyone to get hurt, but it's very expensive for a company when somebody slips and falls and they go on long-term disability, and you lose their expertise, and the company's paying insurance premiums, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it's in everyone's interest. It's in the shareholders' interest for everybody to start thinking about safety.
Yeah.
So it's a good business decision.
It is. And it's a business decision. It's a good business decision in alignment with that type of organization. Any organization can choose that. So on the topic of compassion, and you want to have more of a compassionate, I think of Zappos. Zappos has this wonderful culture. I showcase them in the book. And, their employees say that this company has made me a better human being. And they're constantly finding ways to, what's their tagline? It's escaping me right now, but something about smiling or happiness. We want to, I think it's happiness, spread happiness, or I'll leave it in the show notes because of course it's not on the top of my head. But that's their mission and that's their culture. And then they live and breathe that and they find unique and different and small. It's not about these big, we were so compassionate because we did X, Y, Z. It's about the everyday decisions that you make that all add up to the summation of what your culture is.
Right.
So I really like that idea.
Yeah, and Zappos, I guess I've heard a good example of them when somebody bought some shoes for somebody who passed away.
Somebody passed away.
Yeah, and they wanted to return the shoes.
Yeah, they wanted to.
That was late or something. They didn't do it soon enough, and then an employee came on board and said, "Well, let's not worry about that," but also sent them some flowers. I guess.
Yeah, the day of the funeral. Yeah.
So
and from the
you never forget that, right?
You never forget that. That woman who received that will never ever think of the lifelong loyalty by her and anybody that she touches that loves her, right? That she has a connection with, because that's going to translate and spread and be shared because it's relatable. And not just that, but internally the culture was that employee who made that decision did not need a yes from somebody, from an authority from above. They are empowered to make those decisions.
Yep.
Which is a beautiful thing.
I wouldn't want to suggest that companies should try and act like parents to their employees, but as a dad with two kids, I'm always trying to show them in one way or another a better way to do things or correct something that they shouldn't have said. And sometimes when it comes back and you hear that they said something and they did the right thing and they said it just the right way or made someone feel great, you feel like $1 million, and it's because of the practice that you put into it, right?
Yep. People learn through example. You can't say this is our culture and live a different culture.
Yeah, my son was just last week. We're staying with friends, and they were going to a wedding, and the woman was wearing a dress, and it was sort of a strapless dress that was low cut as well with a little belt on it. And she asked my youngest 6-year-old what he thought, and he said, "It looks like a towel that looks really good on you."
She
so you got
asked
2 thumbs for the compliment, but we had to massage, I guess.
That's really funny.
There,
well, she asked. She opened it up.
Yeah.
Why did she ask?
Because I don't know. She was just asking. I don't know. But okay. You never know what you're going to get, right?
No, you never do, especially with children. I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It looks like a towel, but it looks really good on you. That's really funny. She must have laughed.
Oh yeah, she posted it on Facebook with the picture of him and her in the towel dress.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Anything else that you want to share with organizations in line of customer service, compassion, brand invincibility, through your experience, through what you've seen, or any tangible takeaways that have worked for the clients that you've worked with?
I think I really focus a lot on storytelling. I think it's so important, and I think one of the areas that I think gets doesn't get enough attention is illustrating the story. That when you do something good as a company, I think it's incumbent upon you to actually share the story, rather than say, I don't want to look like I'm bragging. You should be sharing the story and sharing it with as many people as you can, and do it tastefully and with humility. But we are all leaders. We're not just all storytellers. We're all leaders or potential leaders. Mm-hmm. And if you're in business and you're doing something right, you may be able to influence a company that bases all of their decisions solely on shareholder value or profit. And if you can do something that says, this happened to us and we built our business this way, you're making the world a better place. And I was can I tell this quick story?
Yeah, of course.
So I was working on compassion, and I was in New Jersey, and I was at the Newark airport. I was stopping for food on the public side of security because I had extra time, and I'm just having one of those food court meals, and this homeless looking guy, very dirty hands and a big scraggly beard and stuff, comes in, and he starts picking food out of the waste baskets, and he starts eating it and smelling it, and he was very careful about what he was eating, but he was still hungry, you could tell. And as he walked past me, I said, "Are you hungry?" And he said, "Yeah, I am." So I said, "Why don't you take your pick and have anything you want? I'll buy it for you, and maybe you can join me." And so he said, "What you're having looks good." So I sent him to the Chinese food place and gave him $11 because that's what it cost. And while he's in line, I realized on my bill it was $11.50. So I gave him another dollar in line. I said, "Come back, that you need $11.50." So when he came back, though, he's got his food and he puts the money back in front of me. And he says, "When you gave me the money, the man behind me offered to buy my meal." And so we sat down and he gave me the money back. So I said, "Well, here, now you have another meal for later." And we start talking, and it turns out that I thought he was drunk or stoned. But once I started talking to him, and he felt like someone was actually looking at him, his body language, everything changed. He sat a little taller, and he turns out he was in the Navy. He worked on fast attack and nuclear submarines. He had had bladder cancer. He was in the process of being treated for that. Was at the airport for 4 days. And he did, just like he wasn't asking for money for food, he wasn't asking for anything from anybody. He was trying to figure something out, I guess, but he didn't have $20 to get back to New York City. And he was sleeping in the parking lot of the Newark airport in January in the cold. And he basically gave him $20, and I said, "Go home." And he started to cry. You could see his cheeks swelling up. And he said, "Man," he says, "I've been here for 4 days and no one's helped me at all. And when you don't have a roof over your head, you've got nothing." And he was telling me about things, like he saw my guitar, and I started telling him about United Breaks guitars. He's like, "Dude, that's the funniest story I've ever heard." I wish maybe I was going to be a guitar player one time, but I didn't have the money and that sort of thing. So I went to the Navy and said he'd like to maybe he could get an operation, but it was going to affect his ability to have kids. So he's holding off on that. And I said, "You can go to a sperm bank and make a donation in there and have that for later, but your only risk will be that your kids may be freezer burned." And he laughed at that. Says, "That's funny, man." And we got along great. And so we parted company. But the best part of the story is that I went through security and I typed up that story. And as you would know better than anybody, on Facebook, you need short messages, right? But mine was like 1,300 words. It was massive. But I had to get on my plane, so I just hit send. And the next couple of days were unbelievable. Since United Breaks Guitars, I've had nothing close to that, where people read that story, and I had, I think, over 2,000 shares of that story. And it made other people say, "Oh, I've seen some homeless people," or "I'm going to do this." And it started to branch off, like I was saying, where I'm not trying to control how people will do. I just shared my story, and all these other people had ideas on how they could be more compassionate. And it sent these ripples around. And I didn't do it because I was looking to get shares. I just did it because it was an emotionally impactful thing. So I shared it.
Yeah.
And it changed my life, but it also had a change in thousands of people's lives for a small amount of time, where they might not go to CNN or the Patriot station and get emboldened by whatever side they're on in this crazy world we're living in, where it's so one-sided and no one sees themselves in other people. For that, all those people that read that saw themselves in everyone else for a while. And that completely convinced me that I'm on the right path, that companies can be more profitable, but be better places by being more compassionate. And we can all improve ourselves by doing that.
I love that story. And it, for so many reasons. One, because you're just an incredible human. That's why, I adore you.
You had me at hello.
But not just that, on so many levels. But so this is something that I'm not good at sharing things like that. Like I do what I do, and I just do it and I move forward. So that resonates with me. And the other part is that, so for example, I do the same thing in the sense of, whenever I see somebody in need, I will go and I'll buy them food, or I'll do this. And what I've learned, what I've seen, is when you do it, other people follow. So for example, it was pouring rain. I was on Fifth Avenue a few months ago. It was pouring rain. And there was this homeless woman sitting on the side of a building, shivering, like just soaking wet and shivering. And I remember I was late. I had to go to bring my luggage to my hotel, which was around the corner. So I kind of just ran. First of all, I was just awestruck at the fact that nobody, like, she was there and everybody just walks by. So that kind of struck me and stuck with me. So I ran and I put my luggage they knew me at that hotel. So that's great. They were there to wait for me. I went to the pharmacy next door. I got an umbrella, I got a blanket, I got, scarf and mittens. And then I went to the little local place next door and I got warm soup and just a whole bunch of food.
Yeah.
What struck me, what stayed with me and will forever stay with me is the fact that when I sat down next to her and I handed her everything. And her, first of all, when she saw the soup, her eyes lit up and it was this, like she needed that warm food. She needed food and she needed warmth. And then, so as she's eating, I was handing her, new mittens or gloves. And she looked and she said, but I have gloves. And she showed me these soaking wet things that were on her hands that were doing nothing to serve her. And I said, yeah, but they're soaking wet. These ones are warm and, fresh. And she said, no, I have gloves. So I left things with her and I said, can then give them to somebody else, like give them to whomever who doesn't have gloves. But what resonated with me or what stuck with me were three things: the food, her reaction to that food, that how desperately she needed that, and that just kills me, that just stays with me there. The fact that I was giving her, we live in this consumerist world, right, where it's more, 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 and here is somebody with nothing that is tangible and material. And when you give her something new, her immediate instinctive reaction was, I already have, I don't need. That really stuck with me.
Mm-hmm.
And then the thing that I see all the time, every single time I do something like this, is now all of a sudden, the second I sat down next to her, 5 people walking by stopped and gave something, whereas those 5 people would not have done that before, had I not been
Right.
there. So it does give this ripple effect. And then in this particular case, I remember walking away and a woman came to me and said, please go give this to her, and handed me money. And I said, she would love it if you did. And
Yeah.
for whatever reason, she said, I can't, no, please go give it. So I turned around and I said, that's from that lady there, and I gave
Yeah.
it to
Yeah.
her and I walked away. And that too stuck with me. And the fact that somebody, for whatever reason, I don't know her story and I don't know, anything about her. And I can't understand because I don't have the data or the knowledge or to have the understanding as to why she couldn't go and give it,
Mm-hmm.
but that she wanted to, and that it was that ripple effect that did that.
Yeah.
So, your story, sharing that and hearing from you is, I never share this stuff. Like, this is just what I do, but I never share it. It's kind of mine, but it shouldn't be, because you're right. It does empower and it does inspire and it does move people to action. And I see that, I should know that because I see it when it happens, when I'm doing it with those 5 people that actually stop now who wouldn't have stopped earlier.
And you can make the argument that being compassionate is selfish in a sense, but it's really not,
It's
because
not.
when you do something like that, like I felt like $1,000,000 after I had that experience, but not in a way like I'm patting myself in the back thinking, look what I did, but I just felt fulfilled, right?
Yes,
I felt like I was doing something
of
that
course.
not just that I found time in my schedule, I felt like I was acting on purpose in a way that I should be living my life. And that was more rewarding. I got more out of that than he ever did. And that's what we should be shouting from the rooftops. You want to help people change the world or live a more empowered life, care more about other people. It
Yeah.
just gives you more back than it ever takes from you.
And the other thing too is that what I see from those 5 people, and that consistency in those, let's call them 5 people, and even in your story, all of the ricochet that had the effect to
Mm.
do, um, people need leadership. For whatever reason, those 5 people or whomever, you had impact on and that went and took action afterwards, they wouldn't have done it otherwise, but it's within them. And we look to brands and, you know, people in leadership and authoritative positions for leadership. And it's when we have that power and that opportunity, I believe that it's our responsibility to live up to that. And looking at the fact that other good people, good humans, need that leadership in order to, and then feel good about themselves. Those 5 people and the people that acted on after your 1,300 words, they felt good about themselves, and that has that ripple effect. So
Yeah.
it's this beautiful, beautiful circle of, and compassion our world needs more of it, and brands need brands have an opportunity with it, and it leads to brand invincibility. So it is completely relevant to this conversation.
Yes, it is.
Dave, you're awesome. Where can people find and follow you?
Probably everything Dave Carroll related is on my website at davecarrollmusic.com. My email is dave@davecarrollmusic.com. There are many Dave Carrolls, so if you went to just davecarroll.com, you would get a different musician, Dave Carroll, in the UK, and he's a wonderful person, but davecarrollmusic.com.
Dave, well, and either way, links will be below this podcast and or video, no matter where anybody is listening or watching it from. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your wisdom.
Thanks, Melissa. Pleasure to be here.